White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says President Trump is still planning to issue tariffs on Canada and Mexico tomorrow. In fact, the president himself said this just last night from the White House. President Trump issuing a February 1st deadline for the 25% tariffs on imports if both countries do not halt the flow of illegal immigrants and fentanyl. Joining us right now with the latest is Peter Navarro. He is President Trump's senior trade and manufacturing advisor. He's helping craft the president's tariff options on this front. And Peter, it seems like we've come an awfully long way just in a week and a half since we last talked. Where do things stand right now? Do you expect to see these full 25% tariffs enacted starting tomorrow?
I have no breaking news for you on that, Becky. Not my lane. Last time we talked, I talked about the importance of talking about why tariffs. So I can't tell you when. I can talk a little bit about why. I do have a little breaking news, though. That data cube you had in the last segment, I think Jim Cramer is going to jump out of that and squawk on the street. Just saying.
Surprise box.
As for the real world, Andrew kind of teased I was back in the real world. Apropos of the discussion we're having, I want to talk a little bit about one of the big reasons we think about tariffs, and that's the fentanyl. We got the Super Bowl coming up, and eerily, the amount of people that fit in the Superdome are almost exactly equal to the number of people dying every year here in America from fentanyl. And that comes from China and Mexico. So these are why we have these kind of discussions. And we're facing a set of national emergencies. One, of course, is the people dying. With respect to illegal immigration, 6 degrees of separation. I suspect just about every American knows somebody who's had somebody robbed, raped, killed by an illegal alien. So we've got that going. And the numbers, Becky, of illegal aliens that came in during the Biden administration are staggering. Think about this. Connecticut, just up the road from you, right? About population about 3 million. That's about how many people came in every year during Biden. Same as the population of Arkansas or Nevada or Mississippi or Utah. I mean,
Peter, this is what we talked about a week and a half ago. And at that point, we were talking about how this is a negotiation. But we're here. Right. The deadline's tomorrow. Has there been progress made on any of those cases? And by the way, you just mentioned fentanyl is really a problem from China and secondarily Mexico. Why is Canada wrapped in on this?
Canada is a big part of the illegal immigration problem. They have very, very lax visa programs, which I was surprised to learn because I go way back when I used to fly into Canada to give speeches. It was like, it was not pleasant, but a lot of the terrorists that have come in have come from Canada. I mean, we have the fentanyl crisis, we have the border crisis. We also have something that concerns the president deeply, which is the $1 trillion trade deficit that we have every single year. That's as Warren Buffett said, that's property and the wealth of America going offshore. And Canada, Mexico, and China actually account for almost 50% of that. So the boss wants to do something about that. So we have the fentanyl drug crisis, we got the border invasion crisis, we've got the trade deficit issue. And this whole other thing coming at us like a freight train, and we did talk about it last week, but it's worth refreshing, is the tax hike that's going to happen, almost $500 billion a year tax hike, if Congress can't come to terms with a new tax bill. And President Trump has a great new tax cut, the largest in history, and tariffs can easily pay for that. President Trump wants to move from the world of income taxes and countless IRS agents to a world where tariffs, like in the age of McKinley, will pay for a lot of government that we need to pay for and lower our taxes, and that's through the external revenue service. So what's going on before us, and the market should be comforted by all of this, because taken as a whole, we're going to have lower inflation and faster growth, and we're going to have a more secure and prosperous America, which is good for the world because
Peter,
go ahead.
I just want to talk through some of these points because the president has a very broad agenda. He has a lot of things he wants to get accomplished. Some of those things actually come in conflict with each other from time to time. And I think a lot of people watch to try and figure out which is going to take precedence, how you find and put these policies together. Obviously, he wants to stop the fentanyl problem. Obviously, he's looking at illegal immigration very closely. But the market seems to be trading in some ways like some of this stuff may not happen tomorrow, those 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. And let me just walk you through some of the Wall Street proclamations on this. You've got Barclays saying if the tariffs are put in against Canada, Mexico, and China, it's going to be a 2.8% drag on the S&P 500's profits. Citigroup is saying a narrow tariff scenario is likely to result in a 50 basis point compression on the S&P 500 gross margins. You've got other places that are looking at home builders potentially having lower housing starts down the road. He wants to get more housing. He wants to get more affordable housing. Automakers like Ford and Tesla are expected to take a big hit if these tariffs are imposed on Canada and Mexico because those two countries account for about 1/5 of the value of U.S. vehicle consumption and production, according to Goldman Sachs. You've got all kinds of issues about inflation being concerned, and I can cite Barclays, Goldman, Capital Economics, all of these different places that are talking about inflation going up anywhere from 35 to 40 basis points to 0.9% on these issues. That's where I understand there's a lot the president, the administration wants to do.
But let me say this. Every one of those organizations, groups, and studies said the same damn thing about the Trump tariffs back in 2018, 2019. The sky was going to fall when we put them on China. The sky was going to fall when we put them on steel and aluminum. And the sky didn't fall. In fact, the sky got real blue and bright, and it was morning again in America. We're going to have a golden age in America. So I don't believe those studies. I've seen too many Wall Street studies designed to spin things around and make it go the way they want to go, not the way President Trump and this country needs to go. So let's see what happens. The boss loves to say that. And when I come on, I love to talk about always the whys of the tariffs. And I think if people understand, last thing I'll say, Becky, this is really important. The presidential memorandum, day one, America First trade policy, everyone on Wall Street should read that carefully because that provides the roadmap. You asked me when. It's all in there. And who the players are, whether it's the great Howard Lutnick at Commerce or the great Scott Bessent at Treasury, or whether it's Kevin Hassett or Jameson Greer. These folks are going to be in charge of the data cube, as it were, at the White House. We got to get one of those things. I love that thing. But that's how things are going to unfold, Becky, and it's going to be a beautiful thing, a golden age.
Hey Peter, can you just react to what's happening with TikTok? And let me ask it in this context. Clearly, there was a bipartisan law that was passed. The Supreme Court upheld that law. The president has now said that he wants a negotiation to try to sell the business to a company in the United States. And yet we have this unusual circumstance where Apple and Google, based on the law, and by the way, based on comments from people like Tom Cott and others, say you cannot put this thing on an Android phone or an Apple phone. And they're abiding by that in terms of hosting it themselves. And yet you have your boss, President Trump, saying actually, to some degree, maybe either disregard the law or I don't know how you want to describe it. And you have companies like Oracle and Akamai that are saying, okay, we're going to go along with the president's version of this versus Congress, the Senate, and the Supreme Court's version of this. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't want to disappoint you, Andrew. I never like to disappoint you. Not my lane. I'm not involved in that a whit. But I'd like to tell you just a really quick story, because you said I was back in the real world. When I was in prison for defending the Constitution, I remember one time I'm sitting at lunch with the guys, and they're talking about how much cheaper all the drugs were now on the street and how hard it was for the dealers to make money. And I go, why? And because the border was wide open. That's the real world, okay? That's the real world. And that was really kind of interesting. The other thing I'll tell you is CNBC was actually the thing that was always on at 6 in the morning at the prison. So figure out why that is so.
Was it a form of torture?
Yeah, I don't know
Drum
what
roll,
that means
please.
for our
Boom.
demo, Peter.
Yes.
I don't know what that means for our demo.
I'm just saying there was a lot of white collar dudes in there, and they were sitting there watching.
It's like when they play the same
CNBC,
song again
not the other
and again.
network. Okay, just so pat yourself on the back. Okay, but I do hope Joe gets better. I miss the guy.
He'll be back very soon. He will.
Okay.
I think he's
Yeah.
feeling better already. Peter, very quickly,
Yeah.
there's an article in the Wall
Sure.
Street Journal today that says several of President Trump's aides are trying to figure an off-ramp so that you don't go to this universal tariff starting tomorrow. It also brings up the idea that there are some concerns that if they are enacted, they would be struck down by a judge. Is that what's happening in the White House right now?
So you got the best trade team ever assembled. Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, Kevin Hassett, Jamison Greer. Okay, there's not an inch of difference between any of them, and whatever you read in the press from anonymous sources is not coming from any of us. And this game they play where lower level bureaucrats get quoted as senior level officials, anonymous sources by the fake news, I'm sick of it. The boss is sick of it. That's not going to happen in this administration. If that keeps happening, then something's going to happen in terms of better control of the press flows. But no, we are united, and which is not to say there aren't interesting discussions, but that's fake news, Becky. When you see anonymous sources in the paper, it's fake news.
Peter Navarro, want to thank you for joining us today, and hope you will tell us as soon as you have some breaking news on this front. When things happen, I'd be happy to happen with them. Okay, but I hope what I provided you today was the context for the decisions that are going to be made. I think that's my value added here. Okay, Peter Navarro. Thanks, Peter.
You take care.
You too. Also, a programming note for you. Don't miss the digital premiere of CNBC's Trade War Stockpiling that airs tomorrow on CNBC.com. We're going to dive into the world of trade and speak with companies using strategies to mitigate the impact of tariffs.
Meantime, Amazon now saying that DeepSeek's market-shaking AI model is now available